Let me start with a simple question that sounds almost too basic to matter, but it matters more than anything else in this story. Who does the justice system move quickly for, and who does it move cautiously around? Because once you start watching how power actually interacts with accountability, you realize speed and hesitation tell you almost everything you need to know. This week, two conversations collided in a way that's revealing. On the surface, they seem unrelated. One is about Jeffrey Epstein and the long unfinished business of accountability. The other is about MAGA politicians attacking so-called sanctuary cities. But underneath, they're connected by the same organizing principle: how the law is enforced, who gets the benefit of restraint, and who gets the full weight of the system. Let's begin with the Epstein question, because it never really goes away. It just recedes, then resurfaces, usually when new documents are unsealed or when another official reminds us how little closure there has actually been. Here are the facts, and we should be disciplined about them. Jeffrey Epstein was a convicted sex offender. He ran a trafficking operation involving underage girls. He had connections to powerful people across politics, business, and media. He died in federal custody in 2019 under circumstances that were, at best, catastrophic failures of supervision. That much is not in dispute. What is in dispute is what happened next, or more precisely, what did not happen next. There has been no comprehensive public accounting of how Epstein operated, who enabled him, and whether anyone who was not already prosecuted should face criminal exposure. Civil cases have produced fragments. Unsealed filings have produced names, insinuations, and context. But criminal accountability has been narrow, cautious, and in many respects frozen in time. That is not an accident. It is a choice. Now, Donald Trump appears in the Epstein universe in ways that are often misunderstood, sometimes exaggerated, and sometimes deliberately blurred. So let's be careful. There is no criminal charge against Trump connected to Epstein. No victim has accused Trump in sworn testimony of sexual abuse connected to Epstein. In fact, one of the most cited accusers explicitly said Trump did not abuse her. Trump has acknowledged knowing Epstein socially, as many wealthy figures did in the 1990s and early 2000s, and there are photographs of them together at public events. Trump has also claimed he barred Epstein from Mar-a-Lago. That claim has been disputed in terms of timing and motive, but it exists. Those are the facts. What matters is not inventing allegations. What matters is understanding how the justice system handles proximity to wrongdoing when the individual involved is politically powerful. Here's where the Department of Justice enters the picture. The DOJ has enormous discretion. It decides when to open investigations, how aggressively to pursue them, and when to close ranks around institutional risk. And in cases involving former presidents, that discretion is exercised with extraordinary caution. That caution can be justified. Prosecuting a former president is destabilizing. Investigating one can be perceived as political. There is a real interest in avoiding abuse of prosecutorial power. But caution, over time, hardens into something else. It becomes a default posture of protection, not protection from guilt, but protection from scrutiny. When Epstein-related materials are unsealed and the DOJ responds with silence, that silence speaks. When civil cases expose patterns but criminal inquiries do not expand, that gap matters. When the system signals that certain lines will not be crossed, powerful people take note. This is not about accusing Trump of a specific crime. It's about observing that the system has shown no appetite to explore the full ecosystem of Epstein's power, especially when that ecosystem overlaps with contemporary political influence. And that brings us to the other half of this story: sanctuary cities. MAGA politicians have spent months attacking cities and states that limit cooperation with federal immigration enforcement. They describe these jurisdictions as lawless, as defiant, as places where the rule of law has collapsed. Listen carefully to the language. They say laws must be enforced uniformly. They say no one is above the law. They say discretion is weakness. And yet, in the very same breath, they defend or excuse selective restraint when it benefits political power. This is not a coincidence. It is the central contradiction of modern right-wing legal rhetoric. Sanctuary city policies are, in reality, exercises of local discretion. They do not legalize undocumented status. They prioritize resources. They separate local policing from federal immigration enforcement to preserve trust and public safety. Courts have consistently recognized the right of states and cities to make these choices, but MAGA rhetoric treats discretion as defiance. Unless that discretion is exercised by the federal government on behalf of someone powerful, then it becomes prudence, restraint, institutional responsibility. So when the DOJ moves slowly around Epstein accountability, when it declines to widen the aperture, when it signals that this chapter is effectively closed, that discretion is defended as professionalism, as seriousness, as avoiding political spectacle. When cities exercise discretion to protect immigrant communities, that same concept becomes criminal negligence. This is not hypocrisy by accident. It's hierarchy by design. Here's the cause and effect relationship that matters. If the public absorbs the idea that enforcement should be maximal for the vulnerable and minimal for the powerful, accountability collapses from the top down. And this is where Andrew Weissman's influence on legal analysis is instructive. Weissman often emphasizes that the rule of law is not about outcomes. It's about process. It's about whether the same standards apply regardless of status. When DOJ decisions consistently shield elite networks from examination, even without formal immunity, the process itself becomes distorted. Now, some defenders of DOJ restraint will argue something important. They'll say prosecutors need evidence, not insinuations. They'll say civil filings are not proof. They'll say fishing expeditions are dangerous. All of that is true. And it's why this analysis must remain grounded. But here's the counterpoint. Prosecutors also decide what to investigate in order to determine whether evidence exists. They are not passive recipients of proof. They are active builders of cases. Choosing not to look is still a choice. And when that choice aligns neatly with political risk management, public trust erodes. Midway through this story, there's a pivot worth paying attention to, because the Epstein question is no longer just about the past. It's about the future. Trump is running again. He is reshaping the Republican Party around loyalty, grievance, and selective enforcement. His allies are openly discussing using the Justice Department as a tool of retribution if they return to power. So when the current DOJ behaves with extreme caution around Trump-adjacent controversies, it sends a signal, not just to Trump, but to the next administration. It says restraint is expected now, but restraint may not be returned later. That asymmetry is dangerous. And this is where sanctuary cities come back into focus. MAGA leaders are laying the groundwork for aggressive federal intervention in local governance. They are normalizing the idea that the federal government should override local discretion when it doesn't align with their priorities. Combine that with a DOJ that has demonstrated reluctance to confront elite misconduct, and you get a justice system that is punitive downward and deferential upward. That is not how democracies remain stable. There's another subtle point here that often gets missed. The Epstein scandal is not just about sex crimes. It's about how wealth and access create insulation. Epstein didn't operate because no one knew. He operated because consequences were delayed, minimized, or deflected. When the DOJ declines to fully map that system, it leaves the architecture intact. And when politicians attack sanctuary cities in the name of law and order, they are not defending legality. They are asserting control over who is protected by discretion and who is not. Ask yourself this: if discretion is illegitimate when it protects immigrants, why is it legitimate when it protects powerful networks from scrutiny? If the answer is because those cases are complicated, then complexity has become a privilege. This is why the ending of this story matters more than the beginning. We are heading into an election where the concept of accountability itself is on the ballot. Not just criminal accountability, but institutional accountability. Will the DOJ be a neutral guardian of process, or will it continue to internalize political risk as a reason for inaction? Will sanctuary cities be allowed to function as laboratories of local governance, or will they be crushed as symbols of defiance? And will the Epstein chapter remain permanently unresolved, serving as a quiet reminder that some doors once closed are never reopened? If viewers take one thing away from this, it should be this. The rule of law is not measured by how loudly politicians talk about it. It is measured by how evenly it is applied when no one is watching. Right now, too many of the most important decisions are happening in silence. And silence in a system built on accountability is never neutral. If you stop paying attention here, you miss the pattern. And once you see the pattern, it's very hard to unsee it.